Okay, so some background for this session. Blockchain technology is a field at the intersection of mathematical game theory, also known as mechanism design, cryptographic systems, monetary policies, and economics. When we design blockchain systems, it's never a one-dimensional consideration. Jordi and Auryn here were among those actively involved in the original, the DAO affair, which was the original contract that people aped into, myself included. Got hacked in 2016, and I remember Auryn, we had mutual circles in Australia from the builders there, and Jordi was one of the known white hat hackers from people that helped salvage the situation there, navigating the hack. And the interesting debate that came after that, the code is law. However, many times software is the only side of the story that is being told. While hardware considerations are often critical to provide distributed system security. I know that Sebastian from both HOPR and Gnosis that has been among the people most pushing for real decentralization forward and getting out of decentralization theater that you often see in crypto. So robustness in this in security sense is something that needs to be intentionally opinionated, and diversification of hardware and geographical deployment taken into account to preserve privacy, freedom of speech, freedom of transaction, and maintaining distributed system design that makes genuine effort to prevent corporate capture. So this session will be a bit like the Oxford-style debate. We'll have our speakers choose a side, and they'll argue for, and afterwards they'll retort, and afterwards they'll have to choose the other side and argue against. For and against what is the statement that I will share. So, statement goes like this. Software versus machine, ZK versus TEE. In simplified sense, TEEs provide generality of compute. In a sense, ZK provides verifiable integrity of compute. Why choose ZK and why choose TEEs? ZK maxis are TEE grave dancing at every opportunity they have. Auryn is guilty of that. And at the same time, they're overlooking the fact that there's nuance. Not all TEEs are exploitable. Yes, we do see some bad design choices, but not all TEEs are exploitable. So are we only going to go with ZK solution, or we're going to kind of we'll simplify and just succumb to categorize all of TEEs as bad? Yeah, basically your argument for and against TEE. So choose your team. Maybe who wants to start on for ZK against, for ZK and who's for TEE?
I can take both sides.
Okay, you start for TEE and you guys start for ZK, and you can get started with your argument.
Yeah, but my argument is quite clear. I mean, in ZK you can do a lot of things, but you cannot do all the things. If you really want to encrypt computation, I mean, if you want to encrypt Ethereum, for example, you will need something like TEE with the current state of the cryptography. You cannot. I mean, it's like, for example, what would be equivalent, for example, you would need something like obfuscation or other things, but ZK is not enough. Let me put you an example. Imagine that you want to have a decentralized market where all the order books are hidden. Okay? So this is not easy to do. When you want to have a state that nobody knows, you can share the state. I mean, maybe you can split the information between many things, but if you don't want that nobody can collide, and it's not a 3 out of 5, I mean, you want something that's global, then you need something like obfuscation, but in cryptography, but you would need something like a TEE currently, at least until cryptography does not provide this solution. So from the engineering perspective, TEs, and you may like it more or less, but TEs are the only solution that we have to solve some of the problems, if you want to solve in a practical way, want to solve some of the problems in a practical way, in a practical manner. So if you're an engineer, you want to solve problems, certain problems, you have no other options than to choose these.
Okay, so basically if you're an engineer and you want to go pragmatic, you have to use these. Before you guys retort, your argument for ZK.
Yeah, I'm also a very simple engineer. And as a simple engineer, I advocate using the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer if you have to tighten a screw, right? Now, a blockchain is not a hammer. And a blockchain is also not a database. And I think that is the biggest misconception that I see over the years over and over again. That people, think about blockchains for replacing, some database technology. No, databases are great. SQL is fantastic technology, and you should use it. Blockchains are, however, global settlement infrastructure of last resort. That's what blockchains are. And in the context, if you think about global settlement infrastructure of last resort, that's what you use it for. In these cases, trust assumptions matter. And in these cases, it does not make sense to rest the fundamentals that you're building on top of on something that relies on some corporation to be always honest, to retain secrets, to produce all their hardware in a truly trustworthy fashion. And that's why I would advocate in the context of blockchains and in the context of applications that truly matter and need a global settlement layer of last resort, that ZK is the only solution that should be used for that.
All right, Auryn?
So one way that I like to think about this, I like to frame this, is the direction that trust is flowing. TEs provide some very interesting and very strong guarantees for securing a secret and having very strict access control, very strict APIs around how that secret is used and what information it will release from the TE, from the secure enclave. This is fantastic for an environment where the secret does not trust, or whoever instantiated the TE does not trust the entities interacting with the secret. So they want to very much lock down the APIs and at the hardware level, obviously, want to lock down what information is able to escape. And so it's this trust flowing from the secret outward. So the person who instantiated it does not necessarily trust the people that are calling into it. The ZK, I think, is very useful in the other direction, right? Where you, as the person who is wanting to interact with the system, do not necessarily trust the system that you're interacting with or the other people that are interacting with the system. And so you need a very concrete way to verify that your interactions don't leak information that you don't want them to, and that other people interacting with the system, you can independently verify that their inputs are valid. In the case of a TE, you have very little capacity to do this, or all of your guarantees are rooted in a supply chain and manufacture chain attestation. Whereas in the case of ZKPs, you have a cryptographic or a mathematical guarantee about the correctness of information flowing in. And so in this case where it's many parties mutually distrusting, wanting to interact with the system, ZKPs are the only viable solution for that. But obviously there's a bunch of other, or I should say the only solution that's going to give you really concrete cryptographic guarantees. The trade-off space is much larger than that, though. So in practice, there's more nuance.
Yeah, so like if I may paraphrase, the bottom line of what I'm hearing is that from engineering point of view, you want to work with a robust enough system that is general, and that's more pragmatic. From ZK Maxi point of view, you want to have something that survives any potential supply chain attacks. And also every ZK solution in some instance need to be engineered independently, whereas when you have the generality, you have that benefit. So I think that maybe to kind of try and rebuttal for each other is what would be the rationale or motivation to have a design trade-off that would justify for you to, I don't know if to say compromise, but like understand, okay, that's the point where I'm okay with, I don't know if supply chain dependencies or manufacturer, or how do you mitigate it when you're designing system? You want to start, Retort?
In this, there are a lot of things that needs to be improved in the TE to be accepted. The first is open source hardware. I think this is something that, I mean, it's hard. There's some people talking about that, but this is, I think this is a fundamental thing that we need to start talking about. Of course, the industry in the TE has been doing the things probably in the worst way possible. I mean, just for example, just taking something like an Intel processor, which is a very complex processor, and trying to include, I mean, a TE inside the processor. This is not a good idea. I mean, you need to do something more simple, more close, and thinking better. I mean, this is probably the first thing. Not to mention centralized keys by Intel and other things that, I mean, they are just bad by design. But, I mean, I think that if you do the things in the right way, and you instead of, I mean, it's like at the end, the limit is you are either trusting in math or you are either trusting in physics. I'm an engineer. I mean, you study both things, okay? And physics, you can, there are very interesting things that you can do to protect. I mean, for example, most of the TEs, one of the things that they do is you can generate a kind of a private key inside the chip that you cannot access directly unless you have some very expensive and crazy techniques to get inside. But I mean, it's, you get protection by the physics, not by the, of course, you need to supply you need to provide the, you have this trusted setup somehow, the equivalent of trusted setup, which is the supply key that you need to control and so, but there are super interesting things that you can do that touches not the world of mathematics, but the world of physics that can really make TEs possible. So I would not throw it, and especially in applications when you don't have alternatives. Probably the debate is wrong because, I mean, ZK, we are advancing a lot. And if you can do something in ZK, you just do it ZK. I mean, it's not, makes not a lot of difference. Probably there is some performance things, but you don't have a lot of motivations for going to a TE. But again, TEs are much, much more powerful, and you can do much other things in a more natural way, as you say, that I would not just throw it away at just starting, just from the beginning. Can I go to the other side already?
Almost.
I have a question here, actually. So the rooting some of your guarantees in physics, right? And going back to this this idea of the direction that trust is flowing, right? If I'm a entity wanting to interact with a TE that someone else has instantiated, how do I verify that the TE does what it says it does, right? That it behaves as expected, that it was instantiated as expected. And part of the argument for this, if I understand correctly, is that current or future generation TEs will have physical properties, I mean, they cannot be altered. And I think my counter to that would be that physics can be simulated, right? And so like what would stop someone from simulating this setup and still kind of spoofing it out to the entity that wants to interact with it, such that I have no way to distinguish between something that has been physically instantiated and thus cannot be observed without destroying it versus something that has been simulated such that it can be observed.
Not a physics expert on that, but I mean, when you have a TE and when you have a chip, an IC, there is like two worlds in there. Okay, so one is the, let's say, the matter worlds. I mean, the materia, the atoms. I mean, how it's composable in there, and the other is the energy part. I mean, if it's charged in one direction or the other direction, so the logic happens in one direction or the other. So and also there are, I mean, with piezoelectric things, you can even modify somehow the matters inside, so you can clean things and do things in there. So I'm convinced that you may have devices where you can check maybe one of those sites, probably the matter, and what's the physics, it's impossible or near impossible or very, very difficult or very expensive, impossible to check. Again, I think that there are ways.
Right.
So there are ways to do that.
But I think the question there is like, how would I verify that remotely, right? If I don't have physical
Remote
access.
attestation, yeah.
Well, yeah, but you can have remote. I mean, you can check the matter without seeing what energy. I mean, what state is in there. It's hard to check. I mean, you can check the atoms, but it's difficult to check the electrons. I mean, just
Right.
I mean,
well, no, I mean, like very practical example. If there's a TE up in orbit, how do I verify that it's been instantiated correctly?
You can go there.
Good question. There's actually some work also done on physically unclonable functions. So ultimately, you do want to have a footprint that you won't be able to, emulate as the moon landing in the studio in Hollywood. Similarly, you want to have it such that it's actually in orbit and didn't get in a data center in Düsseldorf or something.
Just want to mention one thing. I mean, the first Zcash, it had a trusted strap. I mean, trusted strap, you can see the equivalent of a supply chain.
Right.
It's there. Okay, so it's.
Yeah. By the way, actually, I used to work with the electron microscopes, and sometimes people think that it's very easy to come and get into microprocessors and extract secrets and stuff like that. It's not as trivial. Even if you have a lot of money, it's a lot of specialization, and oftentimes you can protect for a lot of it. Anyhow,
Can we switch now?
maybe quickly now, it would be interesting to hear your counter argument. So basically, for you guys to start with the argument on why choose TEE, and you'll respond.
Yeah, okay. One crucial component in the real world is timelines and money. And unfortunately, we don't always have the luxury to wait for the perfect ZK solution to mature and appear and be useful in production and at scale, right? So if you work on something that needs a solution today, many times you will just be forced to use something else. And then the question is, what do you do, right? And I think TEs are the answer there, right? To pick one example, we have ZK rollups and all sorts of things. That's all great, but people still need indexers, right? You still need indexers to process what's actually going on the chain and make it available to real-world applications. Because guess what? People don't care about the blockchain. People care about that their, neo-crypto banking app works and is correct. In that case, everybody today uses, for example, an indexer. And an indexer is something there's no way you can implement that using a ZK stack. So that would be an example where I would definitely say anytime soon you would have to use a TE, just out of practical availability of the technology.
So I would frame this as, I talked a few days ago about this collaborative compute trilemma, right? You have these three properties, verifiability, confidentiality, and aggregation. And essentially, you can choose 2 out of those 3s, and you must compromise on the 3rd. Jordi hinted at this a moment ago with ZK being kind of an incomplete solution for things where you want to aggregate, when you want to have shared state, shared secret state. And so a practical compromise on confidentiality and integrity for the sake of being able to aggregate inputs, for being able to have shared secret state, is to leverage TEs.
Yeah.
So the hardware industry, I mean, the maturity of the hardware industry for looking at security is much more new. I mean, you go time to market, but the time to market for this is really low. Actually, the immaturity of this you can see in the hacks that are happening year after year on the TEs. Ridiculous and very crazy ideas of the TE. So doing application that you want to run 4 times, I mean, that you want to keep the security for a relatively long time, going to a TE is really a bad idea. You know for sure that I mean, next year it's going to be hacked, if not 2 years. So I think the TEs requires a lot of maturity if you want to be practical. And in the other side, ZK technology is evolving so high. I mean, right now we are proving in Zisk, we are proving Ethereum in real times, which is huge, and you don't need a lot of hardware on that. And so using this new tech probably is what you need for most of the applications, and you don't have to rely in central parties, in supply chains. It's free. It's you can take there. It's open source. You can copy. You can use it. It's everywhere. And this is the spirit of the community that we have. I mean, we are using things that everybody can understand, that everybody can read about, that requires zero investment, that you don't need electronic microscopes and other very expensive things on that. I mean, that's a nice thing of cryptography. That's a nice thing of math. You just take GitHub, open source, read the code, go to the papers, read the papers, and you just have math to trust about that. This is, I mean, this is crypto. This is the nice thing of that. And this is much, I mean, this is free, open, and accessible. So if you can use that, and this is mature, and this is safe, what are you doing using a TE?
All right. Yeah, so definitely interesting arguments and counter-arguments. I think that realistically, at least from a conversation we had here earlier, it's not really that there is one solution that fits all. There's no real silver bullet. It's more about understanding what are the threat models, how to counter them, when do you want to trust physics, when do you want to trust math, at what point you also have limitations. Like one of the aspects, for example, you use ZK, it's very accessible, and generally you want to have something that is low cost to deploy. But some environment, for example, if you go to a multiplanetary species, you start having to rely on physics. And ultimately, every math runs on physics, right? So there's always so many trust assumptions that we make. And I think that being mature enough and pragmatic, you understand it. And sometimes the discussions get, like on Twitter or elsewhere, like it gets a bit polarized for no real reason. But I think it was good to kind of shed some of the light on that. So cheers. Any last comments?
Thanks for having us. A great discussion. And yeah, I mean, just echoing that, it's, I think the reality is that there's a very interesting design space, and regardless of what choice you make, you end up making a compromise somewhere. And so, as Sebastian said, the right tool for the job is the really critical question to get right.
It's do not be maximalist. I mean, just understand what's going on and try to understand all the things. Be very critical in what are the pros and the cons. And I mean, I'm coming here in the middle. I mean, as an engineer, you get in the middle, and so it's just you get the best thing for what's the most appropriate for each thing. And this means that understanding what's going on in both sides. But I think this applies to every library that you are using, every provider that you are selecting, every decision that you are making in engineering. I mean, you need to understand what's going on. You need to understand, go to the roots. You may miss it, you can try it, you can go again, but this is building, and this is growing, and this is what's about.
All right, time is up. So cheers, thanks everyone.
Thank you.